When it comes to Sagawa Issei, those passionate about crime stories will surely know this Japanese man with a disturbingly twisted mind. He was not a serial killer, having taken the life of only one person, but his crime shocked the world in 1981. To this day, no crime seems to surpass his in its sheer atrocity. Today, let us delve into the infamous case of the perverse goblin, Sagawa Issei. On June 13th, 1981, the police department in the western outskirts of Paris, France, received a crime report. An elderly couple walking in the Bois de Boulogne forest had called the police. In their call, they described seeing a small, frail-looking Asian man who had been carrying a suitcase into the forest on 2 consecutive days, only to leave quickly without it. Each time he left, the Asian man abandoned the suitcase somewhere in the woods. At the time, the security situation in Paris was not ideal, with drug gangs frequently using the Bois de Boulogne for deals. The elderly couple suspected the man might be a drug trafficker and reported it to the police. Upon receiving the report, the Paris police quickly arrived at the scene, conducted a search, but found nothing unusual. Law enforcement efficiency in France at that time was relatively low, and the officers were preparing to leave after failing to spot anything suspicious. At that moment, the forest ranger stopped them to provide a crucial piece of information. 2 days earlier, a suitcase had been spotted floating in a small pond in the forest. Normally, no one would bring a suitcase to such a remote area to dispose of it. The ranger suspected it might be evidence of a crime, perhaps containing drugs. With no other option, the police called in a rescue team to retrieve the suitcase from the pond. As soon as the suitcase was pulled out, the officers immediately sensed something was amiss. A foul, nauseating stench emanated from inside, a rotting smell of decomposing flesh. When they pried the suitcase open, what lay before them was horrifying. Inside was the mutilated body of a Caucasian woman, her face completely disfigured and her body cut into multiple pieces, each placed in white plastic bags. At this point, the forest ranger recalled another incident. According to him, the previous day, a tourist had reported seeing a suitcase dumped in the roadside bushes. The tourist suspected it was trash and requested the ranger to clean it up. Hearing this, the police and the ranger quickly went to the forest road and, sure enough, found a suitcase by the roadside. Upon cautiously opening it, they were once again horrified. This suitcase also contained dismembered body parts. After the forensic team pieced together the remains from the 2 suitcases, they found the head, torso, arms and calves of the same woman. However, the thighs, buttocks, breasts, nose, and part of the lips were missing. Additionally, the muscles from one of the calves had been cut off for unknown reasons. Based on the remaining parts of the body, the police identified the victim as a young Caucasian woman, no older than 25. She had fair skin, blonde hair, and stood over 1.7 meters tall. Before her death, she must have been a stunning beauty. While cases involving dismemberment were not uncommon in France, Parisian police had never encountered one as bizarre as this. Clearly, the killer had deliberately removed the victim's breasts, nose, lips, and calf muscles. This was utterly perplexing. Typically, a murderer attempting to dispose of a body would not go out of their way to destroy unrelated body parts, while leaving the victim's face mostly intact. If the perpetrator bore a grudge against the victim and intentionally mutilated the body as an act of revenge, there would be no need to cut off such specific parts. In short, the killer's motives left the police baffled. Fortunately, solving this case wasn't difficult. The initial reporters, the elderly couple, provided a significant lead. The woman, who was an artist, managed to sketch the likeness of the small Asian man with ease. Paris was home to a large number of artists, comprising about 10% of its population. Through the sketch, the Asian man had very distinctive features, making him unforgettable at first glance. The elderly woman remarked, "This Asian man seemed to be just over 20 years old, but he was already balding, which is quite rare." The elderly man added, He was very short, probably only about 1.5 meters tall, looking almost like a dwarf. I think he came here by taxi. Before he appeared, I saw a taxi leaving the area. Based on the sketch and the taxi information provided by the elderly man, the police quickly deployed officers to investigate. Not long after, a taxi driver in Paris came forward saying, "Yes, I did drive a short Asian man to the Bois de Boulogne that day. He was balding and carried a suitcase. He got in the taxi in front of the student dormitory at the Sorbonne University. He didn't speak much French, but was very fluent in English." Upon receiving this information, the police immediately went to the Sorbonne University. The university staff quickly recognized the sketch as that of an Asian student named Sagawa Issei, a Japanese national who had enrolled in 1981 to study English. On June 14th, French police raided Sagawa's apartment. When the large police team knocked on his door, Sagawa, a short, balding man, showed no fear. Instead, he calmly invited the officers inside. Throughout the questioning, Sagawa smiled and answered every question naturally. His calm demeanor even led the police to momentarily doubt whether he was actually the suspect, suspecting instead that there might have been some mistake. At that moment, a young French officer opened Sagawa's refrigerator and was immediately shocked. Inside the fridge were several pieces of meat. Even though this officer had seen many crime scenes, he couldn't suppress his nausea and vomited on the spot. The other officers were equally horrified. They immediately restrained Sagawa, handcuffing him. He did not resist, and obediently let them arrest him. The police then searched Sagawa's apartment and quickly found a rifle and ammunition suspected to be the murder weapon used in the crime. Even at this point, Sagawa Issei showed no sign of panic, instead wearing an inexplicable smile. As the police escorted him out of the building, he even greeted the neighbors who had gathered to watch. At the scene, forensic experts conducted a thorough investigation. There was no doubt that Sagawa's apartment was the primary crime scene. The identity of the victim was quickly confirmed by the police. She was Renée Hartevelt, a 25-year-old Dutch woman. Renée had also come to Paris to study at the Sorbonne University and was a classmate of Sagawa. Forensics revealed a gunshot wound to the back of Renée's head, and the bullet was found on the floor of Sagawa's apartment. Analysis showed that Sagawa had used the rifle to shoot Renée in the back of the head while she was unsuspecting. The bullet exited through the victim's mouth, destroying her lips. This was why Renée's lips were missing from her corpse. Very soon, forensic experts discovered something even more horrifying. After reassembling the dismembered body parts, they found that one of Renée's breasts, her nose and part of the muscle from her buttocks were missing. Meanwhile, Sagawa had only disposed of the body twice. The other parts of her body remained in his refrigerator. So, where had these missing parts gone? When interrogated by the police, Sagawa Issei nonchalantly replied, "I ate them." The police were stunned. "What did you say? Please repeat that." Sagawa calmly reiterated, "I ate them. I ate Renée. Or did I not speak English clearly enough? You know, my English is pretty good. I hold master's degrees in English from both Waco University in Japan and the Sorbonne University in France." The police were left speechless. Sagawa then calmly confessed to his horrific crime in detail. According to his confession, Sagawa Issei was born in 1949 to a wealthy family in Kobe, Japan. Due to his mother falling down a flight of stairs during her pregnancy, he was born prematurely, resulting in him being much smaller than average from birth. During his childhood, Sagawa developed encephalitis, a condition that affected his physical development and left his body increasingly frail. Although he was a very intelligent Japanese child and excelled academically, especially in foreign languages, he grew to be less than 152 centimeters tall, had a limp, and spoke with a high-pitched, somewhat femme. As a result, Sagawa grew up deeply insecure, constantly blaming his mother's carelessness for his underdevelopment while in the womb. From a young age, Sagawa Issei harbored abnormal thoughts. When I was in middle school, I saw the pale legs of my female classmates, and for some reason I felt the urge to bite them, he admitted. He once sought psychological counseling and confessed his desire to eat those he found attractive. However, when his father found out, he immediately decided to send Sagawa abroad to avoid any scandal that might tarnish the family's reputation in Japan. While in Japan, Sagawa almost carried out his cannibalistic fantasies on a German woman. He recalled, "I don't know when I stopped being attracted to Japanese women, but I was truly captivated by tall white women. I felt that by eating them, I could experience a sense of conquest." The woman was a white foreign teacher working at Waco University in Tokyo. Initially, Sagawa sought various opportunities to talk to her and tried to court her, but after being rejected, he developed a desire to eat her. One night, Sagawa broke into the foreign teacher's residence with a knife while she was asleep. Fortunately, as he climbed onto her balcony, the woman woke up, spotted him, and called the police. The next day, the police arrested Sagawa. He explained that he was simply pursuing the woman and wanted to surprise her. Without any evidence to prove otherwise, coupled with the fact that Sagawa had no criminal record and his father's influential status, he was soon released, without charges. After this incident, Sagawa's father sent him to study in France. In 1977, Sagawa Issei arrived in Paris to continue his studies. During this time, he became deeply infatuated with René Hartevelt, a Dutch classmate. René was 25 years old, stood 170 centimeters tall, and was fluent in 3 languages. Learning this, Sagawa lied, claiming he wanted to learn German and was willing to pay for lessons. René, unaware of his true intentions, became his German tutor. Over the course of a month, the two frequently talked and even became close friends. Sagawa later admitted, "I knew that if I confessed my feelings to René, she would reject me. Just like the German teacher did, my psychological state was worse than ever. Every time René left my apartment, I would lie down on the sofa where she sat and lick it," he said with a disturbing laugh. Soon he could no longer control his urges and decided to act on them. To execute his plan, he prepared a rifle and waited for René to come to his apartment for a lesson on June 11th. On the evening of June 11th, as usual, René arrived at Sagawa's apartment to teach him German. During their conversation, Sagawa confessed his feelings to her. René rejected him, saying she had no romantic interest in him. Sagawa pretended to brush off her rejection and continued their lesson. When René wasn't paying attention, he pulled out the rifle he had prepared, aimed it at her head, and pulled the trigger. After the murder, Sagawa cut off the victim's left breast and nose and consumed them. He then attempted to bite into her buttocks but found it difficult to eat, so he used a knife to cut the flesh into smaller pieces. Sagawa described the fat as yellow, resembling corn, and said the flesh from the buttocks was delicious and melted in his mouth like sashimi. After eating, he took photos with the corpse and committed vile acts on the body before falling asleep. The next day he woke up and continued dismembering the body, storing parts in his refrigerator to consume later. He even removed the victim's tongue, stood in front of a mirror chewing on it and imagined he was kissing her. When flies began to swarm around the corpse, he realized the consequences of his actions. He stuffed part of the body into a suitcase to dispose of it. After returning to his apartment, he fried another portion of the meat to taste it again. Sagawa Issei's behavior was so bizarre that French police suspected he might be mentally ill. They sent him to the Paul Giraud Mental Hospital in Paris for evaluation. 3 French psychiatrists concluded that Sagawa suffered from severe mental illness and required immediate treatment. As a result, he was not prosecuted and was detained in a psychiatric hospital for over 3 years. At this point, his father, Sagawa Akira, intervened. Akira was not an unknown figure in Japan. As mentioned earlier, he was the chairman of Iwata Industrial Corporation, a company responsible for Tokyo's wastewater management. After Sagawa committed murder and cannibalism in France, the incident shocked Japan. The Japanese media immediately labelled Sagawa Issei as Japan's greatest disgrace of the 1980s. Akira also faced heavy criticism and relentless attacks from the media. Believing that his son's confinement in a European psychiatric hospital only brought shame to the family and would continue to fuel media criticism, Akira used his social connections and hired international lawyers to bring his son back to Japan for treatment in a domestic psychiatric hospital. After a lengthy legal process lasting 3 years, Sagawa was deported from France in 1984 and admitted to Matsuzawa Psychiatric Hospital in Tokyo for treatment. Strangely, many Japanese psychiatrists who evaluated Sagawa reached the opposite conclusion. Most believed that Sagawa did not suffer from mental illness, but was instead a psychological deviant who should be prosecuted for murder. On August 12, 1986, after more than 2 years of treatment at the psychiatric hospital in Tokyo, Sagawa was declared cured and no longer a threat to others, leading to his release. The Japanese psychiatrists hoped the police would intervene and prosecute Sagawa. However, numerous legal complications arose. French authorities stated that Sagawa had been deported as a psychiatric patient, not a criminal. France could not transfer the evidence of his crimes to Japan for prosecution and insisted that Sagawa be returned to France for trial. However, Japanese authorities argued that Japanese law had no precedent for such a case and could not send Sagawa back to France. Consequently, judicial loopholes between the two countries allowed the monster to escape justice. More than 4 years after committing his crime, Sagawa was officially released. However, Sagawa Issei's fate was far from pleasant, and his family suffered as well. Japan is a society that places great importance on honor, especially for prominent figures. Disgraced businessmen who go bankrupt often find it impossible to recover, as society no longer accepts them. Many such individuals choose to end their lives or wander across the country. After his release, despite holding master's degrees from 2 prestigious universities, no company dared to hire Sagawa. He submitted over 500 resumes but never received a single interview invitation. The Japanese public believed that Akira had exploited legal loopholes between Japan and France to help his son escape justice. Akira faced intense public condemnation, earning nicknames like the Mortal Boy, the immoral businessman, the perverse father of a perverse son, and Japan's greatest disgrace. As a result, Akira's company was boycotted by Japanese society and ceased receiving any orders, eventually declaring bankruptcy. Akira's family, once wealthy and renowned in Tokyo, quickly fell into debt, becoming part of the lower class of society. As for Sagawa, he was never able to find stable employment. To make a living, he took on various odd jobs. He went on to write 18 novels about his cannibalistic fantasies, one of which, titled In the Fog, bore striking similarities to the Renee case. He even appeared on a cooking show to teach culinary knowledge, feeding the audience's morbid curiosity. This sparked criticism of the TV station, but they defended themselves, claiming, "We did not break the law." Sagawa also acted in 2 adult films, portraying a voyeuristic pervert. Humorously, to avoid scaring the actresses, the director did not reveal Sagawa's true identity to them. It was only after the filming concluded that the actresses discovered the lead actor was the cannibal Sagawa Issei. This revelation left them horrified and pale. Despite these activities, Sagawa remained a pariah in Japanese society, scorned by the mainstream. His parents passed away in 2005, and he was barred from attending their funeral. In his later years, Sagawa relied on social aid organizations for survival, as he could no longer support himself. In November 2013, Sagawa suffered a stroke caused by a cerebral infarction, leaving him almost entirely incapable of self-care. With no money to hire caregivers, he struggled to survive, living a miserable existence. It seems karma arrived a bit late. Yet, even in death, this twisted man showed no remorse. He once said, "In the remainder of my life, I still want to eat human flesh. One more time. If I could taste it again, I could die with no regrets. I suppose it's selfish of me, but if I could have that taste once more, even if it meant going to the gallows, I wouldn't feel any regret. What do you think about today's case? Please leave your comments below so we can discuss it together. Don't forget to support us with a like and subscribe to the channel to motivate our team to bring more dramatic cases. And that concludes today's case. Thank you, dear viewers, for watching. Goodbye, and see you next time.